We're over a week into 2025, so if you've already forgotten about 2024, then good for you. But I had 16 5-star reads in 2024, and I want to tell you about them today and see if I can convince you to read them as well. I've already mentioned 4 of these books in previous wrap-ups and videos, so you can check those out if you want more details. But I don't want to turn myself into a walking, talking Goodreads summary page, so I'm going to tell you about each of these 16 books by giving you the first line and the vibes. And then you can decide if this sounds like something you want to pick up. I think we're also going to notice the trend of the kind of vibes that are in my 5-star books, and I think that will be depressing. I think they're going to be quite depressing. So I don't know what this says about me. Let's find out. Of my 16 5 stars, 15 were fiction and 1 was non-fiction, 14 were physical books and 2 were audiobooks, and they were spread throughout the year across 10 of the months. I just had 2 months without a 5-star. They include one of the longest books I read in 2024 and a couple of the shortest books. 15 were written in English, but 1 is in translation, and 2 of my 16 5-stars were by the same author. In no particular order, here are my 16 5-stars from 2024. First up is Julia Armfield, Our Wives Under the Sea. The deep sea is a haunted house, a place in which things that ought not to exist move about in the darkness. This book is about marriage, queerness, grief, the deep dark depths of the ocean, fragmentation of self, and a general sense of being unsettled. Book 2 is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This is the 3rd book by Emily St. John Mandel I have read, and this has a chunky first line. Edwin St. John St. Andrew, 18 years old, hauling the weight of his double-sainted name across the Atlantic by steamship, eyes narrowed against the wind on the upper deck, he holds the railing with gloved hands, impatient for a glimpse of the unknown, trying to discern something, anything, beyond sea and sky, but all he sees are shades of endless grey. The vibes here are literary sci-fi, the interconnectedness of different people's lives, and a slow sense of loss. I was right that it was going to be cheery. Book 3 is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. The very famous first line of this one is, of course, last night I dreamt I went to Mandalay again. I've been having a great time with Daphne du Maurier over the past couple of years, and this one is no exception. This features unhappy rich people, secrecy, and a problematic but romantic husband. Speaking of slightly unromantic romances, the next book is Trespasses by Louise Kennedy. They follow the guide, a thin, pale girl. This is set in Northern Ireland in the 1970s. It's about the tragedy of civil violence, family responsibility, and a passionate love affair. It does lack speech marks. This chunky beast is The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honoré Fanonne Jeffers, which I discussed in my Big versus Little Books video. It opens, We are the earth, the land. This is about American racial history, the legacies of violence and sexual violence, storytelling, and ancestral connection. Next up is The Wolf Border by Sarah Hall. This was my last 5-star of 2024. Opening, It's not often she dreams about them. This features flawed people trying to do good work in different ways. The desire for connection, the cool of the wild, and the quietness of snow and Cumbria and isolated living. It also lacks speech marks. Next up is Shirley Jackson, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. My name is Mary Catherine Blackwood. That's not doing a huge amount as a first sentence, but it's a fantastic book. This is American Gothic. It's violently codependent sisterhood, mob violence, and childhood magic. Next up is All That Remains by Sue Black, the only non-fiction 5-star of 2024 for me. It opens, Death and the hyped-up circus that surrounds her are perhaps more laden with cliches than almost any other aspect of human existence. This is a book about forensic anthropology. It's about how people's lives are written onto their bodies, about violence and loss and quests for answers, and about the quiet beauty of mortality. Next is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. This features a prologue which is part of the book, but I'm going to cheat and not use it as the first line, partially because it's almost entirely in French. The first line of the book proper is, In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's not the Bible, but it is about monks. It's about medieval theological arguments. That's convincing everyone to read it. It's about murder and the power of books and the search for individual meaning and morality in the world. This is A Long Petal of the Sea by Isabel Allende. It starts, "The young soldier was part of the baby bottle conscription, the boys called up when there were no more men, young or old, to fight the war." This is about 20th century migration from Spain to Chile. It's about family histories and family secrets, fascism, medicine, and poetry. Next up is Green Grass, Running Water by Thomas King. And this is actually a book with some laughs in it. I was wondering if there were going to be any, but this is funny. The opening is, "So, in the beginning, there was nothing, just the water." A nice little mirror with the Umberto Eco. This is a book about Indigenous and European storytelling and myth making. It's about Indigenous reservation life, about people making decisions in their ordinary lives, about the interplay between Christianity and North American Indigenous creation myths, about coming home, and about the comedy of existence. I didn't think 16 was that many 5-star reads, but when I'm listing them one after another, it feels like a lot of books. Next up is A Children's Bible by Lydia Miller. This opens, "Once we lived in a summer country." This is environmental collapse and the imagination and insight of children and sleepwalking into disaster and the world going topsy-turvy. And it's also a bit funny. Next is The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. "Still hours of dark to go when I left the house that morning." That's a very syntactically interesting sentence. This is set in 1918 during the Spanish flu epidemic. It's about women in medicine. It's about the randomness of death and disease and war, about trauma and hope and morality around women's bodies, and a little bit about Irish nationalism as well. Now I've got the second Thomas King 5-star of 2024. This is The Back of the Turtle. I actually read this one first, although it's a more recent book. It opens, "First light, the shore in shadows, the fog banked on the horizon." As with King's other book, it opens with water. It's about corporate environmental destruction, Indigenous connection to land. Again, it brings in various mythologies and plays with ideas of truth and knowledge. And it's also about redemption and how people can be redeemed by being part of a community. Again, with a few laughs. I'm getting 3 books with some comedy in, which is a lot more than I thought I was going to get, given how gloomy much of my reading typically is. But speaking of gloom, this one doesn't have many laughs. This is Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. It's the follow-up to Shuggie Bain. It's not a sequel, but it's kind of a thematic follow-on. It opens, "As they neared the corner, Mungo halted and shrugged the man's hand from his shoulder." It's about religious tension and homophobia and poverty and violence against children and secrecy and the search for love, both romantic and familial. It's quite depressing, actually, but it was very good. And then finally, I've got Kate Atkinson, Shrines of Gaiety. This isn't my favourite ever Kate Atkinson, but I had a great time reading it, so it was 5 stars. This starts, "Is it a hanging? An eager newspaper delivery boy asked no one in particular." This features Kate Atkinson's incredibly skillful prose. It's 1920s crime and glamour. It's got a criminal matriarch and undercover investigations, bootlegging, social climbing, violence, and glamour. I feel like I said violence a lot more times than I was expecting to during this summary. I hope that 1 or 2 of those piqued your interest. Half of them were in some way historical, but across different times and places and genres. A couple had speculative elements. There's some gothic fiction and strong environmental themes as well. And in terms of prose, I would particularly pull out Julia Armfield, Shirley Jackson, the Thomas Kings, and Kate Atkinson for beautiful writing, clever writing, like a skillful use of the form of the novel. And I also want to give a shout out to my 4.5 stars from 2024. I had 19 of those, so these were all also great books that I really enjoyed or appreciated, or both, including again some environmental themes, some incredibly clever and beautiful writing, queer identities and stories, some powerful and useful non-fiction, and just some great storytelling as well. I hope that whatever your 2024 reading year was like, you have some great books in 2025. And if you have read any of these 16 that I talked about today, let me know. Or if you pick any of them up as a result of this video, I'd love to hear what you think of them. Thanks for watching.